What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 70. It's just me, Jason, Mike, kicking back, chatting it up very early in the morning. I don't have a kid. This is just my wife's brother and their family's in town. They got two little ones running around, so we're recording it early. Thank you, Fulfill. Thank you, Northbeam. Thank you, Postscript. Three softwares I love and use. They sponsor this episode, so you get free e-commerce news coming in 3, 2, 1. Join our newsletter as well. Here's the episode.
Guys, I want to talk to you about Fulfill, one of the sponsors of the pod, and why we are big fans. They have built a modern ERP that is built for digital entrepreneurs that want to keep their books in order and want to make sure that they're driving their business forward, have good reporting and good visibility into their inventory, into their financials. These are things you have to grow, and Fulfill has done a great job of it. One of the things I love about the company, they're bootstrapped. They don't have outside investors. So they're able to build the company the right way. From their pricing model to how they add features, they've been able to do it in a way that's entrepreneur friendly. Sean uses them. They're a great product. I would encourage everybody to check them out. Fulfill, thanks for being a sponsor of the pod.
WooCommerce has 71,000 stores doing $1 million or more per year. And I mean, that's almost doubling Shopify's base. I'm like, that is because people are talking about like, okay, well, if e-commerce isn't growing all that much, right? If it's growing 10% per year, Shopify's putting up 23% growth. Where's the growth coming from? They're adding new users. And it's like, well, who's not on Shopify? Well, we're in a bubble because apparently there is 300 stores on WooCommerce doing $100 million or plus. And that doesn't sound like a lot, 300, but like targeted.
Man, are those international? Like, what are those?
Dude, yeah, international legacy stores.
It's legacy. It's the big boys. Shopify was the little guy, right? Arm the rebels, and the big boys were on these other platforms. And I think they're slowly coming over. Some big ones have, but a lot have not, right, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, they've just started to build out enterprise solutions and working with like enterprise technology. Because look, I was a Shopify bear for a long time because I'm like, how can this thing get bigger, right? Like I'm on it, all my friends are on it, everyone I know is on it, but everyone I know is a modern entrepreneur who made their business in the past 5 years and runs Facebook ads. Where there's like somebody out there who's like, yeah, I make a bunch of money off of SEO. He ranks for diapers.com or whatever, right? All those people.
If you can monopolize something, you can figure out how to make it really profitable. And I think Shopify is doing a much better job of gradually becoming the only show in town when it comes to e-commerce hosting and e-commerce sites. And if they continue to consolidate like this, I have no doubt that they'll somehow turn that into really good profits over time.
Totally. So I think there's 30 billion in GMV just going after the very top stores on WooCommerce. So we're talking 1-to-1 or 10-to-1 sales reps, right? And that is 10% of Shopify GMV. So there's a big bucket of 10% of GMV they can just go out there and acquire slowly, but they can put the resources into like hand switching these people. And that 10% GMV bump gets them another year of growth. Like they still have a long way to go, and they haven't even cracked anything in Asia yet. So good earnings, good leadership. I mean, I think they could get to 500 billion in GMV pretty quickly. What are your guys' thoughts?
So this is a great transition into what we talked about before we started the pod. Somebody sent me this when I was on vacation. It was basically Toby has this habit apparently where he will passively be a part of a lot of different Slack channels at Shopify and monitor what's going on with different projects. So new project starts, they spin up a Slack channel. Toby will join it and just kind of watch what's going on. And then if he's not pleased with how it's going or decides it's not a priority anymore, he'll just drop in the Slack channel and be like, hey, this is canceled. You're all going to be reassigned. And anyway, this person was talking about how that impacts Shopify's culture. Is this good? Is this bad? obviously it's pretty demotivating if you're working on something and then just out of nowhere the CEO drops in and is like, "Hey, yeah, this isn't going forward. You're done." But it kind of brings up the subject of when you're running a company, whether you've got 2 employees or you've got, whatever 20,000, whatever Shopify has. How do you know as the CEO when you should use your best judgment and you should push forward with what you think's best versus when do you allow your organization and its wisdom or its judgment to overrule your own? And I've really struggled with this. I think over the years of being a CEO, there have been times where I think I didn't trust my judgment and I allowed people to talk me out of things that were clearly the right thing to do. There's a really specific example if you guys want to deep dive that's happened in the last year for me with this. But then I think there's also been other situations where I really wanted to do something and I had very smart people around me saying, "Hey, you really should, measure twice and cut once on this." And I just kind of charged ahead. And then I regretted not listening to them more. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this subject and to riff on that.
Well, I can also think of a very specific example where we sell MagSafe wallets. They go on the back of your phone or whatever, right? And it's a brand new product. We had a debate what goes inside that package. Obviously, the wallet does, but what else, right? Do we put a money clip? Do we put all these other things? And I was super, super in favor that it should be a smart wallet bundle and it should come with AirTag attachments. I'm like, guys, we know these people have iPhones. Like, it'd be so easy to be like, this is the smart wallet bundle. You can track it. It goes on your phone, whatever. And I got pushback from my chief merchandising officer, my chief product officer. They're like, no, they both are like, we think that's bad. We should keep it.
Why did they not like it, Sean?
I think they just thought it made it too gimmicky, like that we have an amazing upsell flow with the AirTag. Like, why do we want to fuck with the upsell flow? Like, why are we trying to complicate this and make it too different of a product from a normal Ridge wallet? Like we already know a lot of people are going to buy it. Why try to make it better? And we had like a debate for 20 minutes back and forth, like laying out all these reasons. And at the end of it, I'm like, look, this is a very low impact decision. We're going to sell out of these regardless of what we do. And you're the two smartest people I know. And if you guys both agree, then all right, I'll shut up. We'll do whatever you want and I'll move forward. So I have a specific example, and it was so unimportant that it makes sense to roll over, right? And probably 70% of the time you should just roll over on those things. And you should save all of your mental energy and political will for the things that really, really, really matter. That's my thought on it.
So I think it's a great point. Just to crystallize what you're saying you look at how high impact, how high leverage is the decision, and you pick your battles. And I think it's also worth mentioning here, Sean, you probably have practically the power to be able to force through almost any decision that you want to with Ridge, but you're still thinking strategically in terms of how much political capital, goodwill capital do you have with the team. And practically, I think this is an important point, that it's not just about can you force a decision through, it's is it worth it and what are going to be the ramifications of it. And if you force decisions through all the time, your top people will leave because they don't want to be automatrons and they don't want to be told what to do all the time. Jason, what were you going to say?
Well, it's interesting. This reminds me of a lot of what was talked about at the JP Morgan Founders Forum, and Jack Ma was there, and there was a lot of conversation about management and leadership. And it's like, there's not a question. It's not really a question of whether you, Mike, or you, Sean, or Danny, or I are right. It's a question of how often you are right versus others. Like saying, well, you're in the chair because you're more often right than others. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten there. And nobody bats 1,000 either. Like, you're the cleanup hitter, and you're going to get it done a lot, and you're not always going to get it done. I mean, but on the other hand, you do need to let people make decisions and make mistakes. That's how everyone grows. And it's about the judgment at the top to do it. So I think this is all, like, this whole conversation is what good leaders talk about. And I think that we need to empower other people at the organization to make more decisions. I've been trying to do that. But I think what you have to do as well is like what you said about Toby. You got to let people make decisions and monitor it. And sometimes you just got to step in and veto it, or sometimes you just got to step in and change the direction. And I see that all the time in our organization. Yeah, we've got incredible people at our company. I mean, Sean texted me over the weekend. It's like, you guys are like the Ridge plus Wolf of Wall Street. I was laughing. I'm like, where did that come from? But we have incredibly smart people all on our team, but they don't all have that, like, the time in the game and the judgment. And you got to be ready to do it. You have to exercise your influence. That's why you're in the chair.
I read this from a VC once and I thought it was really good. He said, I spent most of my career thinking that my job was to be the smartest person in the room and to have the answer. And then I realized that my job was to discern who is the smartest person in the room that has the best judgment on the subject and make sure that they're the one that makes the decision, which is kind of what you're saying, Jason. Do you have any specific examples where either you let somebody else's judgment override your own, or you came in and said, "Hey, we're just doing this"?
Unfortunately, I give too many specific examples about HexCloud on this pod that I probably shouldn't. So I'm going to leave
Oh,
that one.
okay. We're going to get you censored.
I'm going to get political. I'm going to be a good politician here, like Governor Mike, and just be like, hey, I'm going to pass on that question. But I think it's important to just really, like, first of all, you hire good people. You got to let them make decisions, and you got to let the mistakes happen. But Sean's example of, like, that was a low cost behavior to him, to, like, let his team do it. And your team is only going to get better by making mistakes, and learning from, if they're smart enough to actually learn from the mistakes. And hopefully the mistakes aren't that big, but you have to let them make some.
Yeah, and in my example, there was no mistake. Like either one of those outcomes would have been successful, right? So it's like, look, if they feel strongly about it, they can have the W. I honestly do not care on
But
who
that's a
gets it.
great point. Let me just add to that. Like, that's a great point about decision making in general, and, like, decision analysis and decision paralysis. So many people think, like, there's this perfect answer out there, and there isn't. And I forget which quote it is, which parable it is, but it's like, any decision is better than no decision, right? You guys have all kind of heard that one somewhere. And that's really the
Yeah.
point. It's like, a lot of times you're just, like, splitting hairs, and it's like doing a financial model. Guess what? It's going to be wrong. Like, it's never going to be perfect. And so, like, a lot of times it's just that it really can go either way. So many things, like the decision, it can go either way. And there's absolutely you really just can't predict it, because there's so many external factors. Like, there are so many inputs to the model, and you may wind up right, you may wind up wrong, but going in, you probably couldn't predict it, because something came in and something happened that made the decision either good or bad.
Patton said, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week," which is, I think, kind of what you're getting at. This whole bias to action, Jason. And in some ways, I think good leadership is teaching your people to have a bias to action instead of getting paralyzed trying to make the perfect decision. Amazon has a pretty good heuristic for this idea of one-way and two-way doors. That a one-way door, it's a decision that once you make, you can't unmake it. And you better be comfortable being in that room because you've gone through the door and you can't go back out. Two-way doors, you can walk in, you can walk out, you can change it, it's flexible. And I think one of the principles I've learned is when it's a two-way decision, that I can typically do a lot more what Sean just advocated for, which is just allow other people to make a decision. I want to be there and help them think through it and ask questions and poke holes and try and kind of challenge thought processes. But it's also a much better way for people to learn because there's kind of the freedom for them to make a decision. And if a week or two later, the organization doesn't like that decision, you can change it up. It's those one-way door decisions that, really where this gets tricky because they do have some kind of permanence and they're going to matter for future performance.
Yeah. So like when I said there's there was no wrong outcome with choosing what to put in the fucking box. It's like customer service software. It's like either way, whatever we pick, we're gonna answer tickets. So to somebody, it's really important what they work on. It's just not that important to me, right? I have to think about products we're gonna make, marketing. Like today I might spend $1 million on something that could actually like marginally impact or drastically impact EBITDA, right? Like I have to make that decision. Once we get down to what's going in the box or what tape we used to put on the box, I'm like, bro, whatever, pick whatever you want. Like I have to not care about that.
That's actually part of the skill, Sean, is being an effective executive is about being able to identify leverage, points of leverage. and understanding what are, like explained this to somebody last week in our organization, how many things happen in a year between the customer support tickets and the shipments and the, conversations with suppliers and samples ordered. And, the answer is millions of things happen every year in our organization, but the vast majority of them don't impact the trajectory of the organization. Like if you did really poorly at those things, if you did them at like a C level or a D level, eventually it would harm the business, but generally they don't impact the business. Doing them at an A minus level instead of a B plus level, it's not going to move the trajectory. And then there's this handful of things, 5, 6, 10 decisions, maybe less even, that totally are transformative to the trajectory of the organization over the next 2, 5, 10 years. I have to be focused on those things. And those are the things that you really have to get, uh, to not use the word right, you really have to make good decisions there, because if you don't, then you end up regretting it. For us, one of the examples is that there was a period where we needed to decide if we were going to get into this kind of big 40-ounce tumbler space, and if we were going to do it, how we were going to do it. And the fact that we chose to get into it when we did and how we chose to get into it probably is the difference in us being a $200 million revenue company versus an 80 or 90 million revenue company. So it was huge. And it was that one decision really kind of transformed the company. So how do you guys identify what are like these really high leverage things that are worth kind of going to the mattresses with your team over
Can you
and
just,
are
like,
worth
talk a little
digging
bit
in?
more about that decision? Because I'm just curious
Yeah.
as to how it relates, because we had something very similar, and, like, how did that whole thing go, like, where did the idea come from? How did it all go down? Like, what was the impetus?
So we pay attention to what's going on in the market, and we are in a market that is, I would say, becoming more and more fashion like, more and more trend based. And when the Stanley Quencher started to really gain steam, I would say there were some women in our office that were talking about this in as early as 2020, 2021, and at probably the front end of the trend. And to be really frank, the first time I saw it, I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. There's no way we're going to make that. And that was kind of, I don't think even a minority opinion. It just looked like a ridiculous thing. Like, what woman wants to carry around this massive, multi-pound 40-ounce tumbler? And as time went on, we saw it continuing to gain steam, and we saw more and more external evidence that this thing was kind of catching fire. So part of it was, at what point do you allow the market's data to override your intuition about a product? And for us, that was in late 2021. We started to say, okay, this is becoming enough of a thing that we need to get serious about it. The biggest question internally was, how do we do it in a way which is similar to what the market's responding to, but different enough and better enough that we feel confident bringing it to market. And in our particular case, what we were able to do is take something very clever about how we designed a lid for a smaller tumbler and apply that, kind of move that concept up to a bigger tumbler. And as a result, when we brought it to market, we have the best reviewed 40-ounce tumbler. We weren't first to market, but we were kind of best to market with that product. And even though we haven't had the same level of success that Stanley's had with it, it's obviously been really, really good for our organization.
Well, that's a
There's a
textbook, well,
couple
so
of
that's a textbook, like, example of just, like, being a good operator, seeing a market trend, and, like, even if that market trend was sort of a little bit against your DNA or your thinking, you're like, "It's working, guys. We have to chase this trend," that, and then we execute it by making the products different, by differentiating the product. I mean, that's just, like, a
yeah.
really good operate. That's why you're sitting here. That I don't think there's anything, like, super special about that decision. It's just like, "Okay, we gotta decide, do we wanna, veer away from, like, what we currently think based on what the market's telling us? Let's do it. Let's do it better," and bang. I mean, that's great. It's just great
And
operating.
in this case, Jason, it's kind of, I appreciate that, but it's easy for me to say, if we had been willing to move about 6 months earlier it's possible that we become the viral trend, not Stanley, because our product is much better, but they had so much of a head start that we were never going to get the virality that they got. And if we'd been 6 months later, we might not have gotten any of the benefit. So the timing really mattered. And I'm glad that we came out with it when we did. Obviously, in retrospect, I'm kind of like, how can we find these decisions? How can we make that decision a little bit earlier? Like I use an analogy with our team of waves. And what I've told them is we're pretty good at looking 50 feet off the shore and seeing a wave and then saying, hey, that looks like that's going to be a pretty big wave. Let's make sure we ride that wave. I'd like to see the wave 200 feet offshore so that, I can be the person that gets the most out of that wave. We're still working on that organizationally, which ironically, the next product that we're going to get into, which is a no-brainer, could be transformative to our business. Sean's really advocated for this. We are not getting into it early, and this is somewhat due to me not listening to my own tuition and listening to my team say, hey, we're overwhelmed, and not launching into it when we could have. So we're not getting there yet, but we're going to try and be a little bit more into getting things when they're further out, when the waves are smaller and still building steam.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Operator's North Beam ad unit. So 30 seconds, I'm going to tell you all about how if you have any problems with North Beam, you can directly message Austin, the CEO. He is there. He will set up your ad account. He will make your bet. He'll give you cookies. Really, they have a dedicated team of people, probably 30, 40, 50 reps at this point, who will make sure North Beam is working correctly and functioning so you can get amazing data out of this ecosystem. They will be more hands-on than any meta rep will ever be, and they're going to help you understand where your ad dollars are best spent, best positioned, and which ads are working. My team works with the Northbeam team literally every day. They're in my Slack. Maybe you don't get the same level of support as an operator, but they will be there to make sure it's working. And if you're not happy at all, just email Austin. He will take care of you. We use Northbeam every day. It's a benchmarking tool. It's super helpful for forecasting, daily pacing, inter-hour pacing. So we can see like if we just launched an ad in 2 hours, if it's working or not. That's what Northbeam does for us. So thank you, Northbeam, for the support. I'm customer probably number one. So thank you so much.
Well, one thing to add regarding Northbeam, because we just went through a contract renewal with them on their specifically on the MMM. And we got a pretty sweetheart deal, and I expect them to come back to us and raise our price, and they kind of deserve it. I was like, let me reach out to the team, and see how it's going, right? Because I'm not in the day to day. I get feedback, and the team was like, they have improved the MMM so much since we started it that they were like, we should definitely pay for this increase. So. And my team hates every agency and most SaaS. The only person that hates SaaS, the only more than my team is Sean, Frank. But yeah, I mean, they came to us. They're like, hey, you guys got the sweetheart deal. We were one of the first MMM clients. And I was very, very pleased when my team was like, it's really working well for us. So that's my little MMM plug.
Being focused in the right area is exactly what Toby's doing when he's dropping in and deleting Slack channels, right? And this goes back to a point, Mike, you made a couple weeks ago about people's North Star being dislodged from business objectives, right? The customer service team might be like, we want to get, only 10s in customer reviews or whatever, right? But by doing that, they might spend way too much time per ticket, and it ends up being so cost prohibitive to give like this bespoke customer service that doesn't actually drive results. There's just one made up example, but that's what Toby's doing. He's going in there and he's like, hey, you guys are working on a project that's not going to increase GMV or increase SaaS subscription or make our, SaaS customers more money, right? Like you're not working on that. This is just a pet project, or it fell off the tracks. We have to delete it. And getting people aligned around those things is your main role as an executive. And then also it's so much easier to make money in a growing market. Like that's what you did when you saw this big wave come and you're like, we got to ride that wave, right? It's in hydration. Like, it's so funny as someone who doesn't work in water bottles, you'd be in like, we had this big debate about making a 40-ounce tumbler or not. My first thought would be like, we're going to make every fucking cup on earth.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
exactly. Well, but this is a good example, Sean, is it's like what happens internally is that your team says, well, wait a second. How is that? If we release a new tumbler, how is that going to disrupt our supply chain with our current best selling tumbler? And what are the ramifications? And there's internal inertia to resist change in almost every organization, I'm convinced, because most people don't like change. Pioneers are a very small percentage of the population. And one of the things that's been hard for me to accept, there's this kind of archetype, stereotype of the jerk CEO who says, I don't care what you think. This is what we're going to do. I don't listen to anybody. And obviously, none of us are wanting to be that guy. But I've learned on the other side, I cannot be obsessed with people liking my decisions or approving of my job performance all the time. Because if I do, I will naturally be change averse because people are change averse and they don't want you to move their cheese. They don't want you to push them when they already feel busy. And yet that's exactly what the job of a CEO is to do, is to say, hey, I know you're tired. I know you're busy. I know this doesn't seem like what you want to do, but we've got to go take that hill. And that you're looking out for everybody's best interest. And that if you've watched the documentary, The Last Dance, there's a great part where Jordan is talking about how he was perceived and that people did not perceive him as a nice guy. And he said, one of his quotes is he says, sometimes I push people when they didn't want to be pushed. But I think that that's pretty much what a CEO is it's pushing people sometimes when they don't want to be pushed.
yeah. So we do like every week there's employee recognition where like we have a form, people write in and we're like, this person did a good job or whatever. And it gets posted in a Slack group at the end of the week. Someone wrote me one, they're like, Sean's a great leader. He's not perfect, but he has what it takes to get us where we need to go. And I'm like, not perfect. Fuck you. That's my first thought. I'm like, look, they didn't mean any disrespect by it, but I took a screenshot and I sent it to all the leaders in the company. And I thought it was really funny. It's a good example where like, I don't work for them. I don't work for their approval, right? Like there's two things that I'm in charge of. Well, I guess three: top line revenue, profit, and making sure the bank account has enough money to make payroll. That is the extent of my job, right? Like I don't report to anybody. I don't care about if they think I'm a bad guy or not. I need to check off those three boxes, and that's what gets me a passing grade. It's not, oh, I was the funniest guy on stand up. It's not that like, oh, I'm so liked and people think I'm a caring individual. I'm like, dude, I tell my employees, I'm like, dude, I would not work in person with you because I do not want to hang out. I'm like, I'm not that type of fucking guy. The only thing I want to do is make sure top line grows, bottom line grows, and we have enough money in our bank account. But going back towards growing markets are the easiest place to make money. Like the Stanley thing, like we talk about this all the time, like competitors are such a an amazing positive force for whatever industry you're in. And dude, I wish there was a breakout viral wallet product that we could fucking ride the wave of. Like I'm in a category nobody loves or cares about. So like, how do you plan for the next viral success? Or Jason, what are you doing to try to catch, what's the next wave in cooking?
Yeah, that's a really good point about hoping that there was someone else to like rising tide lifts all boats. And we see, on the one hand, it really helped us when some of these other newer D2C cookware brands start spending money in the market because it, may drive CPMs, but it also drives massive awareness in our space. And so that's been very good for us. But now it's sort of like we've eclipsed it all. And now all we're seeing like is the knockoff problem. I mean, it's not a big problem for us, but like we see it a lot. We see a lot of those. It's like we've become the standard. And so to answer your
Yeah,
question,
you're the standard. Everybody's
yeah,
chasing you, and you go from the hunter to the hunted,
yeah.
and it's a different feel.
So we have to keep innovating. That's really what it is. I mean, luckily the kitchen is a big space, but I think we've yet to figure out what is the next like big hero product that can replace buying the best frying pan set in the world. We actually do have one that we're working on. We'll see how it goes, and it's a similar AOV. So that's kind of like what we're trying to do. we'll see if we get there. But yeah, it's super hard. At one point, it's like, okay, well, do we just keep drilling the hole deeper? How do we make the hole wider? I think Grid's done a great job with luggage. Mike makes that hole wider with this other new thing that he was talking about. Maybe we do other things. We talk a little bit about consumables. It's an area that we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about right now, but maybe we could at some point, especially because there's a lot that gets consumed in the kitchen. Um, we're a bit spoiled by our high AOV, but consumables is more of an LTV play. It's something that we don't need to do now because our growth is so strong. But there's decisions like that need to be made. I'm like very focused on forecasting right now for a lot of reasons. And I'm looking out 2 or 3 years, and with our numbers, what they are, and the overall size of Hexclad, it's like, in 2022 and 2023, it didn't really matter. And now, like, forecasting and thinking about, like Sean's talking about, like just thinking about top line growth, you get big enough where it really, really fucking matters, and you really need to think about it. And that's our challenge right now.
Well, it's a great illustration what you're talking about, Jason, of just no matter how you're situated, there's something stressful. And even when you're Hexclad, which you guys are best in class in consumer durables right now, for sure, you are the superstar of superstars in this kind of area. And even you are feeling the pressure of growth. And how do you continue to stack growth when you get to really big size? Sean, I think one of the points you mentioning category, I've come to a similar conclusion that just category is almost everything. And it is so much easier to look smart when you're positioned well category wise. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. But one of them is when you're in a growing category, you can go and grow without having to zero sum take from somebody else. So if you want to grow in, like wallets, you're going to have to go and take share from somebody who is making leather wallets or some kind of traditional wallets. I'm assuming like you're going to have to zero sum go and take that. It's hard to get people to think I want to spend more money on wallets or to kind of grow the demand for wallets. In our category, one of the easiest things about it is that last year, I think between units and revenue, the category grew 20 something %, which is crazy. That's an environment where it's easy to grow, where we don't have to go and wrest a customer away from Stanley or Yeti because the category is just growing a ton. So when you find a growing category, you don't necessarily have to go head to head and zero sum. And then when your category is not growing, obviously growth gets an order of magnitude more difficult. So one of my favorite things about this idea, Mark Andreessen has a little packet. If you go to his blog, it's kind of a now defunct blog. He doesn't update it anymore, but he has a guide to startups. All you have to do is give it your email address, and he'll give you this entire PDF. When I was thinking about starting a company, and before I started Simple Modern, I read through that thing, and it was awesome for me. But one of the things he says in there that's always stuck with me, he says the number one company killer is lack of market. When a great team meets a lousy market, the market wins. When a lousy team meets a great market, market wins. When a great team meets a great market, something special happens. And I've always thought about that. No matter how smart you are, no matter how great your team is, the market is more powerful. And if you compare a great market with a great team, that's when you get the Hexclad, the Ridge kind of outcomes.
Yeah, and I don't think we're in a fucking great market. I want to tie this back to what Taylor Holiday said probably 2 episodes ago, right? The implied growth rate of a business is equal to its LTV. Okay, so like that is a theoretical concept, but it's the most powerful thing ever. And I wrote it down for my entire company that every year we're facing a 90% revenue decline unless we find new customers. So let's just say I sell 1 million wallets this year to 1 million new customers at $100 a pop. I have $100 million business off a wallet. Next year, if I do not find 1 million new people, my business will do $10 million because the implied growth rate is equal to the LTV of those customers.
We should call it intrinsic growth rate. But
Okay, there you go.
but just to really, I mean, it's a very powerful concept actually. And if it's that's like the intrinsic growth rate of the company is just like your LTV and what you know people are. By the way, what Taylor's awesome. Why is Taylor like polarizing? I don't get it.
People hate agencies, I guess, and people think that he just espouses, meta dominance and his way of thinking. I mean, to be bombastic on the internet, you have to have a point of view. But okay, the intrinsic growth rate. Let's break that down. Okay, so every year my business is trying to decline 90% or 80% or something like that, and I
And
have
what you're saying by that, Sean, is that once people buy one wallet, the vast majority of them don't come back and buy another wallet for quite a while. And so if you chart out that LTV, their LTV in year 2, year 3 is not going to be significant. So if there's not new customer acquisition, you're toast. Is that what you're saying?
totally. And yeah, people come back in 5 or 7 years and buy another wallet. And we probably have an 80% repeat rate off of those people over a very long period of time. But the problem is the business has grown 10x since 5 years ago or whatever, right? So those people coming back to repurchase 5 years later or 7 years later are such a small percentage they can't support the business. So we have to find net new customers every single year. And that is the problem with my business and my category and why makeup brands can still go public, right? Because they have an LTV. It's very hard for them to acquire new customers, but if they get somebody, they can stick around for 2 years or 3 years. And Jason and Mike, we have all the exact same problem, right?
Yeah, it's consumer durables. We're all in consumer durables, and consumer durables suck for that reason because, like, if you make a good consumer durable, then people aren't coming back for often years before they buy from you again.
And
yeah, and
investors currently hate consumer durables. So if you think you're going to go start a business in consumer durables and raise money from real investors, think again. They hate it.
okay,
They
Now,
love consumables.
the one advantage to durables is that there's a lot less movement among consumer durables in terms of the brands that are at the top. Like they just move more slowly. So if you looked 10 years ago at who makes cars and you look today, it wouldn't be that different, right? And if you looked at makeup brands, maybe you would have at the very top, you would have the same ones coming out, but like the makeup industry has a lot more churn and opportunity to move around based on trends and based on new entrants. So maybe that's something about consumables. Definitely, like if you walked into Costco today and then you walked in it again in 3 years, you're going to see a lot of different things on the shelves. You might see the same types of things, but you're going to see different brands represented. So I think there's more inherent churn in consumables than durables. And in that way, if you can build something that makes really good products and really has a brand people trust, you probably have a much longer runway before you get disrupted. But as Jason said, right now, there's not a lot of capital that wants to get into consumer durables for sure. And the few consumer durables that have gone public have done terrible. And that's soured investors even more.
By the way, both of you have the benefit of having a little bit of a fashion component. Like I can guarantee you there's people out there with multiple Ridge wallets. Hello. And then there's like people have an entire cupboard full of
Yep.
drinkware, right? Like so you can get them you can get them to do that. So I think you are a little better positioned, both of your businesses from you
I
have a
think you're
better
right,
story
Jason. And I
around that.
think this is actually the thing to call out is that what has made our categories, like Sean has made this point many times, that wallets are a terrible category. And I generally agree with him. What has helped in his category and in my category is the fashionization of that category has created a multi-year stretch where that category has growth built into it. And so we're probably at the end of that stretch of easy growth in our category because it just became normative where people might buy 5, 6, 7 of these. And I will say also, I think our category, the numbers that I'm looking at is our category is starting to slow down. Like Yeti grew their drinkware sales 6% year over year in the most recent quarter. And it's because people just went crazy last year and bought so many that at some point it's like, okay, you've got to kind of work that through the system. But I think the fashionization piece really helped our category, Sean. What you've done getting into women and the way that you're starting to use colors and licensing and different things has definitely helped quite a bit from my perspective.
PostScript is the only SMS solution you need if you're a Shopify e-commerce merchant. I just got the new walkthrough of the Ridge/PostScript/AI/brand center thing they're working on. I'm gonna be super honest. I have very unfamiliar with SMS as a tool. When I started my agency business, people were still sending emails, and the world's advanced to this new text-based platform showing up in your inbox. PostScript's leading that charge. We've been working on it for 4 weeks. We've been in the new AI demo. They got me an extra $12K of purely incremental revenue, more than pays for the demo, pays for all the sends, whatever. I think we generated like $124,000 in total SMS revenue, like, over like 7 or 14 days or something. 12,000 of that was brand new just because of AI. So like a 10% lift and improvement just based on using the AI features. What are the AI features? I'm not going to tell you about those. If you want to hear about those, go to postscript.io, tell them Sean sent you, and they'll give you all these brand new AI features. I think it's generating what the text should be based on interactions with that person. So way more personalized, and it's leading to a 21% lift in EPM. We are closing way more abandoned carts because of this AI feature. They also have a new thing called infinity testing, which sounds like it's from Marvel. It's like, yeah, PostScript infinity testing. It's like if you turn it on, you're going to like unlock the Rubik's Cube of Zoron or something. Look, I'm really happy with PostScript. I'm going to give you my version of why you should work with PostScript. They haven't sued any of their past clients. There's a couple players in the space, not going to name them, but they're pretty famous for giving you free AirPods, that they lead you in the door with very predatory contracts. And then if you try to leave, they withhold your list and they try to sue you. PostScript promises they won't do that. So way more friendly, way more business friendly, way more cutting edge when it comes to actual tech. I think the team at PostScript they're technologists through and through. They're not just sleazy SMS business cats, okay? They care about the products they're making and they're investing money in AI to get that done. Try out PostScript sometime, and that's the ad read. I want to go back to consumables being a hard category right now. The one reason hard durables. The one reason to start a durable goods company is because the competition in this space is incompetent. Like, they are legacy brands who money doesn't go into it. Like, it's like they're very stodgy. Think about like fucking phone case companies or whatever. Like they literally do no innovation. Like there's like I think drinkware was a great example for a long time until Yeti came out. Like it was just whatever you bought on the shelf for fucking 30 years or 40 years. Like a Stanley was a player in that space for a very long time. The one reason to get into the space is like, unlike makeup, where it is hyper competitive, it's a slower industry because there's higher mold costs. Things are more established, right? Going through retailers, whatever.
There's more IP. I don't know how much more IP there is in drinkware, but generally durables have a lot more IP involved than consumables.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like there's no patents on food. Like, and if you ever read forums, people are mad that their co-mans are like knocking them off and making the same product. And it's like, that's the supplement game, man. Like it's all the same. You have to win on marketing, where, Hexclad can win on technology, which, no fucking makeup brand ever gets to. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, the fashion piece. Yeah. The whole reason we got into like just releasing more products is because we have to win over new customers. I'm fighting that intrinsic revenue decline every year. And like the reality is it got harder to find more dudes who want to buy wallets off of Facebook. Like we sold 4 million of them in America. Like I was doing the math one time, like we have 8% of our target market or whatever in the entire United States. I'm like, that's pretty high. That's very high like penetration, right? Like more people have using Ridge wallets than Google phones. I'm like, okay, this is not a good breakdown. So us going into, NASA's been a huge collab for us, or influencer wallets or whatever else, is just to find the next group of people who are more willing to buy it because of this attachment.
Well, one of the things that you've also done, Sean, is you've truly built brand equity. We hear a lot of talk about brand, but my observation is actually brand equity is pretty rare. In your case, because you actually built brand equity when you got into luggage, which is not an easy category. It's not a growth category, that you've been successful. When you got into rings, which again, not a growth category, nothing new or distinctive, but because of the brand equity that you had accumulated over time, you were able to get into these categories of things that men buy and do it successfully.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, we've talked a lot about Stanley on this, but it's so fucking awesome to be in a category that out of nowhere someone added $700 million in revenue from 100. Like there's no other category who's seen that level of success so quickly recently. And you should take all of your winnings and roll them into something that we all know has more lifetime value attached to it. Right.
Yep. That's exactly, I mean, I've told people that 20 years from now, if I tell people about Simple Modern, their reaction will likely be, wait, so you got into insulated drinkware in 2015 by selling on Amazon? Like, of course you succeeded. Like, structurally, you were set up to succeed. You'd have to be an idiot to not succeed. And I'd like to think it was maybe a little bit tougher than that, but it's also true. Like, we were on the right channel with the right product at the right time, and you can screw some stuff up and still be really successful when you've got the tailwinds of the right category, or the right distribution channels.
Yeah, you guys ever play craps? Like Stanley went on a heater. Okay, they're rolling the dice, right? And Mike, a lot of skill involved because you got to place your bets. You have to have conviction. You have to fucking play with this person, right? But like,
Yep.
it's your turn to roll the dice. They had an amazing heater, right? The heater's over. You're up. Big
Well, and you
on
know
track.
what else? There's another brand going on a heater right now. Awala is going on a massive heater. It's another company and brand that I really respect, but they're on a massive heater right now. Like, one of the things that's interesting about our category, and we've had internal debate about whether or not we want to go on a heater, or whether we just want to continue to gradually build the company. Because the problem in durables is, if you go on a real crazy heater, then inevitably there's going to be another side of that mountain. Like, it's going to be tough to be at Stanley over the next couple of years, because you're going to be doing negative comps almost no matter what you do. And it's easy for people to want to move on to another job or another role at another company where growth is easier. And so, like, I don't know if we ever want to be the fad or the thing, but our category definitely lends itself toward that kind of behavior.
Well, the president left. I mean, that's what I would fucking do. I'd be like, yeah, I just delivered literally, I think 1,000% growth one year. I'd be like, I'm out. I'd be like,
Sure.
give me my
Well,
money.
it's
You
like
tweeted
there are a
about this
lot
a
of
bunch of times
examples
in
of
the
that.
past, Sean. You tweeted about this a bunch in the past, like growing 100%. Don't do it. Don't do it. Like we grew 100% plus in 22 and 23, and it was so hard, so hard. And now we're growing really well, like relative to almost anyone else's standards. Um, and I'm like, you know what? It would have been nice if we'd done this exact same thing last year, so kind of know what it feels like. And like there's a bit of a coming down from the high of these absolutely crazy numbers. And like we tell people, I talk to bankers, I tell people our numbers, and they're like, your numbers are insane. And I'm like, they're not as insane as they were. So it's
But
not
also,
fun.
Jason, you don't even necessarily get credit for how insane your numbers are. When you get to a certain point, and this is counterintuitive, but if when you start growing past a certain point, you're not going to get credit from it if you're trying to go public or take investment. And banks start to be more kind of scared and skittish than encouraged. And again, this is counterintuitive. If you're an entrepreneur, you're like, well, why wouldn't financing partners be excited about big growth? But all that signals to them is risk. And so, if you can, I think the point that you're making is, if you could choose grow 100% in one year or grow, 40% back to back years, you'd probably choose to grow 40% back to back years. The reason why sometimes you go ahead and you do it is because you're worried about competitive dynamics, that you're not, that growth won't necessarily be there next year. But it's a heck of a lot easier to not blow yourself up if you're growing at 40%. One other point that I've made before, but I'll make here, is that the biggest cultural risks and the biggest team risks all happen during hypergrowth. It's like, everything's on fire. We got to have more people in here. Wait, can you do that? Great, you're hired. And you get people on the team who aren't up to the standard, don't fit culturally. A lot of the damage that happens to companies happens during these hypergrowth periods.
So, Mike, your point about choosing the steadier growth versus the hypergrowth, I think like that's the logical correct answer. But I think it's actually the wrong answer. I think the right answer is take the fucking money when it's there, because you cannot predict the future and you have no idea. And like I've had this conversation with lots of people in the past about when do we launch a new product? And I'm like, how about we launch it the week before we know it's going to be in the warehouse, and stop like overthinking it. But for sure, it is just way more manageable, and like predictability is and a wonderful thing if you can do it. But there is the issue of, like you said, like you don't want to leave money on the table. Maybe that customer goes somewhere else. So it's like how we started this pod talking about making decisions and executives making decisions. Like there's really no right decision in any of these things. But I think, we did the right thing by riding the wave, even though that wave eventually dissipates, right? And you just glide in.
Yeah.
But the glide
Listen,
can be pretty
nobody's
deep.
armchair quarterbacking your performance. You guys have, like, you've clearly done it right. I think the point that you're, like you said, this ties all the way back to the beginning, which is when you're growing really fast, your organization is generally going to be resistant to more growth and to more change. And that's the art. The art is saying, last year we were growing at 100%. In my organization, when I had another new product idea, is like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't have capacity, and I pretty much listened to them. And unfortunately, I shouldn't have at that particular moment in time. At other points, you're growing fast and the organization is like, hey, we really shouldn't do this. We're barely keeping our head above water as it is. You can drown them by throwing another thing on top of it. And that's where the judgment piece comes in, because it's easy to say, well, the answer is always take the money. And like maybe that's true a lot of the time, but some of the time that one incremental extra project, that one incremental extra product, drowns them. And then that's not what you want to do. That's not worth it. So I'm just a big believer in that there's kind of a continuum, a spectrum, and you can't always say one thing or the other, which is what makes the job so hard, right? The job's about judgment and saying, well, I can't always give the same answer regardless of the situation. I've got to kind of look at the facts on the ground. So anyway, you guys have done a great job. I just don't think it's as binary. And I think I've definitely gotten this wrong at points in the last couple of years, both ways. There've been points where I pushed the team where I should have held back, and there's points when I should have pushed forward and I held back.
All right, there's a Seanism here. I'm still from the
A Seanism. Okay.
Love it. Bring it.
Am I the only person that doesn't have I'm gonna have to think of some kind of clever branding for my words of wisdom. Go ahead, Sean.
A Mikeism kind of sounds like you're having an aneurysm. So
it's not positive.
Well, you can catch so much fish that you sink the boat, right? But you also cannot control when the fish are biting. So the growth is not guaranteed. If you're having a good fishing day, you should catch as many as you can. But you can definitely catch enough fish that the boat fucking sinks. And I think that's
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's what
so there's a great, I'll give you an analogy for your Seanism. Hannibal comes over the freaking Alps with elephants, and the Romans are like, oh my God, like this, they're just like, they don't know what to do. And Hannibal is just destroying the Romans. This is one of the Carthaginian wars. Hannibal's just owning basically the Romans. And he doesn't really have much of a sense of urgency of going and taking Rome, because he's just destroying them. And so he beats them in several battles, and then he just kind of meanders his way around Italy, kicking their tail every time they go up against each other, but he's not in particular hurry to get to Rome. And during this period where he's just kind of screwing around in the countryside, Rome gets their act together. And eventually they beat Hannibal whenever Hannibal finally does try to take Rome. And there's a great quote from some historian that when he could take Rome, he would not. And when he would take Rome, he could not. And that's kind of the fish biting thing. You can't just assume the fish are going to be biting next year or 5 years from now. And I think that's what you're saying, Jason, when you're saying take the money, is that you don't know. You don't know what the fish are going to be acting like in a year. And just like Hannibal couldn't have predicted that there would be a day where he actually was not going to be overpowering enough to take Rome, you can get a sense of hubris and overconfidence.
Yeah, dude, imagine fucking like 3,000 years ago or whatever, some guy shows up with an elephant. You'd be like,
Dude.
God damn. You're like, I got to figure my shit out. I got to invent guns. Or
That
something.
is terror right there. At that point in time, that was the equivalent of having a dragon. It was just like absolutely overpowering.
Yeah, he showed up with a goddamn Gundam robot, like just blowing shit up. I really wish somebody would make wallets that people are clamoring to get and beating down the doors to get. But like there's no cool wallet drops, so people are lining up outside of Target, right? I think that was an amazing boon to the drinkware industry. And let's talk about durable goods sucking. The one company that's done it really well, in my opinion, I bring up all the time, is Yeti, and it's because they have a high AOV anchor product that establishes brand and is growing still, right? The cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, it turned back to 30-something% growth in the recent quarter. We had kind of discussed are we done with the really expensive cooler thing? And clearly we're not. They've kind of gotten their recall issues under control, and they're growing it. And I think you're right, Sean. From my perspective, who's a better consumer durable company than Yeti? Like they've got to be, in the very, very top echelon of those that exist. They've done an amazing job.
Yeah, and everyone listening to this is freaking out. It's like, no, Apple's a tech company, so they're in a different bucket. Nike is a fashion company, they're in a different bucket. Hermes, LVMH, those are luxury companies, they're in a different bucket, right? The consumer durable space is way more like fucking Yeti or Solo Silver, whatever else. And having that high AOV anchor product that builds brand and gets people in the door, and then having the mass market consumable giftable product in drinkware is the powerful combo, and what I've been pushing Jason to do forever, right? Like he has the brand building.
He has the Yeti cooler.
Yeah.
You're saying he needs to add the mass market. You can sell just a ton of this thing.
And giftable, right? I mean, Ridge's whole success is that like the 100 price point is so giftable, right? Or a $50 price point would be so giftable. And I mean, I'm not going to fucking tell the billionaire how to live his life, right? But yeah, that's what I would spend all of my waking hours trying to crack. And like, I'd be like, is it drinkware? You got into knives. I think knives is definitely directionally correct. And just really trying to sell that as a giftable product during peak gift giving.
It's pretty interesting. Ninja is trying to get into drinkware, and they are a company that's really aggressively expanded outward, kind of horizontally with different product lines. I don't know whether they started in blenders or where they started. I think so, in blenders. And now they make a whole bunch of stuff, like including air fryers and stuff, but they're trying to get into drinkware, and I don't get the impression it's going very well. And so it is an interesting question of when are you being smart with product expansion, and when are you just kind of, out kicking your coverage or getting outside of that sphere of what the consumer really is looking to buy from you.
Shark Ninja is a really interesting story. Like if we should do this at some point, because there's a lot of buzz on Wall Street about Shark Ninja. They did the IPO, they did a follow on. The analysts and the bankers, like whenever we talk to bankers, they want to tell us about Shark Ninja because it's a pretty successful IPO. And I didn't even know that they were doing drinkware. I was at the ICR conference back in January, and there was a lot of talk about them because they had done their IPO recently. And they said something like, Shark Ninja has like 1,000 engineers doing product development.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because they just like they just reverse engineer anything that's pretty good, and they have become like the second brand, and somehow it works.
And to your point, Jason, the problem for Shark Ninja, if you're in management with Shark Ninja, is how do you grow? I mean, you have to. Basically, you have to kind of like say anything that goes in the kitchen that's a durable, we've got to try it, because you're trying to produce growth for Wall Street, and that's not going to be easy. You can't just say, well, people are going to buy more blenders this year. Blenders are just like a wallet in the respect that, like, if you buy a good one, like, you're not buying another one for a while. And so it'll be interesting to see when they start to hit the wall of not being able to produce the growth that Wall Street's looking for.
I mean, dude, they're worth $12 billion right now. It's fucking crazy. They're up 2.5x in literally 12 months. I think they IPO'd August 4th, 2023. So it's a 2.5 bagger in 12 months. So I'll dive into this story. It looks like they put over $1 billion in revenue last quarter. It's fucking
they're a monster. And one of the things that is part of my calculus for how I think about how we expand is, are we trying to expand into more kitchen durables, or are we trying to expand into durables that are more kind of on the go, or are we trying to expand into consumables? Well, listen, part of it is I'm going to pay attention to the 800-pound gorilla of Shark Ninja sitting over there. And it's like, is that how I want to expand, by going into the teeth of that? Or are there some other things that are better? And so, yeah, like when you're running a company, you should be smart about picking your battles and who you're going to fight with. And I would kind of rather not go toe to toe with Shark Ninja in blenders or something like that.
Dude, and we can talk shit about, like, who is this for? What does the brand mean? Do whatever, right? Like, because the D2C nerd in me wants to look at this and be like, this fucking is horrible, right? Like, go to their website. I guess Shark sells vacuums and Ninja sells kitchen shit. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Who is this for? But they do $1 billion a year in revenue, or $1 billion a quarter in revenue. So I should really shut up and just buy my Shark Ninja combo hair cutter. All right, everybody, that was episode 70 of the Operators Podcast. Join the newsletter. Thanks for being here. Postscript's great. Northbeam's great. Fulfill's great. I use all of them. I have used them for years at this point. First customer in Northbeam. I was on Fulfill in 2021. Postscript off and on for 5 years at this point. I love those guys. Talk to everybody later. Goodbye.